Hello everybody, and welcome back to the Beatles Forever. Today we're going to continue on with our Wings journey with a couple of new members in the band and the making of Venus and Mars. Well, Paul found success with the album Band on the Run, and he decided it was time to tour again. And Paul decided he needed to hire replacements for Denny Sewell and Henry McCulloch. The first band member he hired was guitarist Jimmy McCulloch. And he was short, dark, and a partier, 21 years of age, according to the book Band on the Run by Gary McGee. He was very talented with his playing, being compared to Eric Clapton. Jimmy was tired of being in and out of bands, and he wanted to be appreciated by a large group of people instead of being in new bands where hardly anybody was going to hear him. And the drummer Paul chose was Jeff Britton. He was tall, blonde, and soft-spoken, and he was a black belt in karate. Well, Jeff wasn't just hired. He had to audition, and Jimmy didn't have to go through all that. But Jeff was drumming against 50 other people who showed up at the Albury Theatre in London in April 1974. This didn't make Jeff nervous. He said he was never nervous. He was just a bit apprehensive. They all had to play 4 songs, and he played with session men instead of the band itself. Paul didn't play. Paul and the Wings group that was left, Paul and Denny Lane and Linda, were sitting in the audience listening and watching. Jeff made an impression, and then the list was him and 5 other guys, and then he got to audition with Wings at that time, and then they narrowed it down to Jeff and another drummer. And later he went to dinner with Paul and the band, and it was there that he found out he had the job. Well, I'm sad to say, but the band didn't gel very well. Just as Denny Sewell and Henry McCulloch didn't have a contract while in Wings, Jimmy and Jeff didn't have one either. The new members didn't like each other from the day they met, unfortunately. Paul decided to take the group to Nashville on June 6, 1974 to get to know each other and to do some recording. While they were there, the band stayed at the home of songwriter Curly Putnam. It was a country estate outside of Nashville, and Paul rented the farm for $2,000 a week. And then this being there inspired the song Junior's Farm, and Paul bought a Honda motorcycle and drove it around the farm and country roads. A security guard there thought it might be a motorcycle wreck because he thought Paul didn't know how to drive it. The band stayed there for 7 weeks and then headed back to England. Still trying to record a follow-up album, Paul McCartney and Wings were supposed to create an album called Cold Cuts, but it never materialized. They decided to go back to America in January 1975 to Louisiana. Jeff didn't want to go to New Orleans. He wasn't getting along with the band, and he was depressed and miserable. Jeff didn't feel the band was sincere, and he felt that every day was a fight for survival. Words were being said, and Linda would get upset because Jimmy would say things about the chords being played wrong, and then he'd blame Linda, and then Jimmy would also try to say things about Denny too, about his tuning. And Jeff didn't care for McCulloch, but he didn't like Denny either. He felt that he was trying to backstab McCulloch. Jeff felt that Denny and Jimmy were ignorant and they were good musicians, but that was it. Surprisingly, he never said anything negative about Linda. The band made snide remarks when Jeff would show up for rehearsals in his karate suit, and Denny said to him, "What are you going to do, play the drums or chop them in two?" And then Jeff decides to leave. The group had recorded 3 songs when Jeff left the group. Linda said the New Orleans sessions with Britton didn't gel, and she said it was horrible because they wanted things to work out. Jeff was in the States, and his wife started talking about separation and divorce, and Jeff wanted to go home and work things out with her. He figured, the band might end, but he didn't want his marriage to, so he wanted to try to work things out with her. But Denny felt like Jeff was in it for the money. He was always talking about, when I get my big house, and Paul didn't like to hear that kind of talk. But he wasn't forced out of the band. Jeff decided to leave the group. A new drummer was found. Joe English was introduced to Paul by Tony Dorsey, who was the arranger of the brass section for Venus and Mars. Paul first asked him to play with the group, but not to join the group. So Joe was from Rochester, New York, and he said he was having the time of his life playing with the band. Unlike some previous band members, Joe thought that Paul gave him a lot of freedom. There were times he would tell you how to play it a certain way, but if you came up with something better, he would go for it. Next, the group went to Los Angeles, and that's when Joe was hired. Joe was thrilled to be in the group, and he was impressed with Paul and how many songs he had written. Paul once again didn't have a contract drawn up. Joe said Paul's gone through that bit about being tied up with contracts, and he doesn't want to get involved with that. We have Listening to What the Man Said was released. This single was released in May 1975. Paul got a saxophonist named Tom Scott, who amazingly did a live one-take solo while he was leaning over the control board, and the song made it to #1 on the U.S. charts. 18 months after making Venus and Mars, there was a celebration party in Long Beach. Bob Dylan was there, Cher, Michael Jackson, Dean Martin, and George Harrison was there, and the party was on the Queen Mary, so that was quite a time they had there. And this was the first time that George and Paul had gotten together since the Beatles had broken up. Well, even though the album Venus and Mars was recorded in New Orleans, there isn't much of a New Orleans sound to it. According to Wikipedia, John Lennon, often in a nostalgic mood during his Lost Weekend period, had told May Pang, his then-girlfriend, that they would visit the McCartneys during the recording sessions for Venus and Mars and consider writing with him again. Lennon's planned visit never happened due to his reunion with Yoko Ono. It would have been so neat to have John and Paul reunite and to create some songs together as they had in the old days. The latter part of 1974 and 1975 had Wings once again in transition. They gained 2 new musicians and then lost the drummer and gained a drummer. They went to New Orleans and to Los Angeles and ended the year on a high note with the release of Venus and Mars. The album helped them continue with the band's commercial success, and it would lead them to do a year-long worldwide tour. So I'll continue to do more Wings, mainly learning about the group from the book Band on the Run. It's a good book that gives the reader an inside look at the Wings. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, if you could give it a thumbs up, it will really help to get the videos seen more. If you want to see more videos, make sure you click on the notification bell, and it'll let you know when the new videos are released. But I hope everybody's been having a good day, and tune in again soon for another episode of the Beatles Forever. Thank you. Bye.